what's up, everybody? Welcome to the Life Inner Show. I'm your host, Jason Wojo, and we have a very special co-host on this episode that's helping me out. Her name is Jackie Conkle. She's a Life Inner coach. I've known Jackie for a very long time. She's a rock star. You're going to love having her on this episode. Jackie, say hi and tell people just like a little bit about yourself.
Hey guys, Jackie Conkle. I've been with Life and Air since 2009. I'm a real estate investor with my husband and a private money lender, and I'm over here in Wisconsin.
Yeah. Is it cold over there right now?
It's freezing. Yes. We're going below zero. We're going below zero.
Very good. Bundle up. Well, listen, Jackie, today we are interviewing our mutual friend, Brian Meidam, who's a successful real estate investor. You know, we've known Brian for quite a while, and his trajectory has been phenomenal. I mean, the guy's done really, really well. There's a lot of investors that have come and gone during the period that he's been successful the entire time. And so I couldn't wait to get him on here to pick his brain and see like what kinds of things he can share with our listeners that's made him successful.
Yeah, I mean, he's a consistent master marketer, and he really dominates the Milwaukee area in Wisconsin. So I'm excited to have him on today.
I am too, guys. Let's go right to our interview right now with Brian Meidam. See what you can glean from this for yourself, because there's a lot of gems that are going to be dropped here. So pay attention. And here we go. Hey, Brian, what's up, man? Welcome to the Life Inner Show.
Thanks for having me, Jason.
Dude, I am psyched to have you on the show here. I've known you, man, I don't know, 10 years. It's been a long time.
It has been.
And you
feels like 20. I'm just kidding.
It's going to be one of those interviews. That's right. And well, listen, man, and I hate to have to say this publicly and acknowledge this, but dude, you have a really cool story as well as an incredible track record of success that I think our listeners are absolutely going to love. They're going to learn a lot from you on this episode. But before we get into like what you're doing right now, but before we get into the tips and the things you've learned over your business career, let's back up a little bit. Tell people a little bit about where you came from and how you got to where you are right now.
Sure. I went to college and did that whole thing, got a finance degree, and then worked for an investment firm in the greater Milwaukee area. I interned there and then started there, got a job out of college, and then worked there from 01 to 07. So I worked as initially as a grunt on a bond trading desk, and then, worked my way from there, from grunt to a little better than grunt.
Senior grunt.
Yeah. And, but I would, had the opportunity. I learned a ton about the financial markets. I am very thankful today. I got to work with some very intelligent people and learned a lot from them. And then in 2005, I think it was, the owner was forced to sell. Wells Fargo bought the company and worked for Wells Capital for a couple of years before making the leap and firing my employer.
So dude, why? So that sounds like a pretty prestigious position. Like, it sounds like I picture you of like, as being like, Leonardo DiCaprio and Wolf of Wall Street, like, just like, that's what I picture right now. Like, what caused you to actually, instead of going for a different employer and staying in that field, what caused you to do what you're doing now, which is real estate?
Well, I started doing real estate on a part-time basis, and then I started educating myself more and reading more. And although I really enjoyed what I was doing, on a long-term basis, I just, having an ulcer in your early 20s is not ideal by any stretch of the imagination. And I got paid very well. I was very thankful for the position I had, but I knew long-term it just wasn't going to be a fit for myself or for my family, just with the lifestyle that I wanted to have.
So when you say lifestyle, you're talking about like time or like just stress?
Yes, stress, time, being able to, right now if I want to coach my son's hockey team, I have two sons. Last year I coached both of their teams. This year I'm coaching one. Last year practices started at 5:00. So I had to be there at 4:15. And then like that corporate world, I just, that wouldn't have been possible to do that type of stuff.
Yeah, man, that makes a lot of sense. Jackie, you also, I know, have a lot of kind of free time, and you do kind of a lot of similar things, and you're spending a lot of time with your kids. Probably that's some of the things that brought you into real estate too, huh?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's probably the common denominator, right? part of it is people always say they want to be self-employed, right? And then they realize that all they do is own their own job and they work twice the hours that they would at a normal job. But real estate really gives you that opportunity to have even more free time because there's just not as many things as you could, do during the day. I'm sure you would agree with that, Brian. I mean, there's only so many things. You can't really work 40 hours if you're a quality real estate investor. Where does 40 hours go?
Starting out, I was working 80. So I learned the hard way.
That's the thing. Yep.
So I was so scared of failure that I would just hunker down. And I think I've said this to you before, Jason. It was like a crack addict in rehab, knowing there's crack in the basement. You're gonna go get it,
dude. Yeah.
And for me, it was, I would go up, have dinner with my wife and one son at the time. We have 3 kids now. I'd work all day, go up, have dinner, and immediately back down in the basement. And I would work until, 1, 2 in the morning. And I'd do the same thing day after day after day because I was just so scared of failure. And then at one point, my wife looked at me and she's like, well, this self-employed thing isn't all it's cracked up to be. And I'm like, what are you talking about? She's like, well, you're working more than you ever have. And basically, like, we were kind of like roommates, right? I wasn't a good husband or father, and I was just working nonstop. So it took me, that was kind of a wake-up call. Like, okay, I have to get my priorities in line. But still for a while, like, I was always running out of fear and the fear was crazy because before I left, I had 1.5 years of income in the bank. So I had, I didn't have any real pressure, but I had a lot of pressure that I put on myself to perform. And I wanted to make this work. So it was just, I was working out of fear of, okay, I got to make this happen. And I was doing deals before I left my job. I would take vacation and stay home and work on deals. And I started getting stuff done. I'm like, okay, because I always said, if you can't do this business part-time, you'll never be able to do it full-time. So I proved myself there. And then when I went full-time, I just got my own way and in my own
forgot
head.
about all that.
Right. That I just had to, work like an animal. And I kind of always work like an animal. I just, work. That was kind of the way I was brought up. And so it didn't seem like that big of a deal until my wife kind of clocked me upside the head verbally of you got to get this sorted out. So got that sorted out, for me, I had to get my office out of my basement, out of my house, leave the computer at the office and just be able to, kind of hit that switch and then mentally check out. So, because I think a lot of us, when there are times when you're at home and your spouse may be talking to you and you look like you're listening, but you're not hearing a single thing they're saying. I know that never happens to me. That never happens to me.
Yeah. Only men do that. The wives are always listening.
Yeah. If my wife is listening right now, that never happens to me.
But there's a difference of being there and being present.
Yeah.
Correct. Yep.
And, and do I still struggle with that? If you ask my wife, she would say most definitely. But it's, it's something that you got to work on over time. I'm a project.
Hey man, we all are, right? Now I'm curious, when did Life in Air enter the equation for you in terms of the lining up with you working crazy hours versus did your wife have a discussion with you first, or were you already in Life in Air at that point? How did that all align? Because one of the things we really try to help people with is finding that balance.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. When I started in Life in Air, I was early on. When did Life in Air start? I don't even remember.
Gosh.
It wasn't called Life in Air back then. When you got involved and when I got involved and when all 3 of us got involved, it wasn't called Life in Air back then. But what was it, Brian? Probably 2008?
Yeah, 7 or 8 probably for you, Brian.
Probably. I think it kind of started with a secret sauce.
Yeah.
Yes. Yep. Which is kind of funny today.
So, no, I wasn't part of Life in Air. I was at that point because I hadn't started yet. And then I jumped on board, and I think, there was a meeting or 2 that I probably wasn't the open book as I should have been regarding my work habits. And then Life in Air helped me get that aligned.
It's funny how that happens, right?
Yeah.
But honestly, guys, this is like a really good sticking point, because anybody who's getting started new, whether it's in real estate or any business that they're, moving into that entrepreneurial world, what I find with the students that I coach is a lot of them, they feel guilty when they're like, well, I have to work 40 hours, or I'm going to have to, keep going. And like you said, Brian, you go to the 80 hours, right? And it's part of it is guilt. And part of it is that employee mentality that's stuck. Like, how could I only work, a 5-hour day and actually accomplish everything? So I would say that a lot of people are doing, active things. They're in activity, but not productivity, right? They're just doing busy work. They're checking emails. They're looking through their spam box. That's not actually working, but it's that guilt of, okay, well, now I'm in charge of this. Or like you said, the fear of failure and just needing to make sure that you're spinning your wheels enough to feel like you're going to be successful. So I think a really important thing is, what would you tell somebody brand new? What permissions would you give them, or what things would you tell them to get them out of that mindset faster than not?
Sure. Good question. I think, a lot of people they think being busy is being productive.
Yeah.
And I think that's a bit of a fallacy. So I would start by writing down every single activity that you do for 3 or 4 days, like every single one of them. Mm-hmm. And then go through that list and say, okay, how many of these are, IGAs, income generating activities? And if you do not, a lot of people, they want to focus on the busy stuff because they're scared of picking up the phone and, for example, picking up the phone and talking to people, right?
Bingo.
Talking to people, networking, making connections. That's going to put money in your pocket. Figuring out the exact language on a postcard that you've made 3 weeks ago, but still haven't sent out because you're worried. Do you use, IT apostrophe S or IT space IS, just, send the darn thing out. So it's focusing on the stuff that puts money in your pocket. But I think out of fear, a lot of people become busy to justify to themselves that they're working hard and working on or in their business, when in reality, they're just delaying the inevitable that, maybe they aren't cracked up for this, or they have to face up and like, okay, I got to put my big boy or big girl pants on and make some money.
Man, I think you said a lot there. By the way, for our listeners, we didn't go into this a whole lot yet, but Brian, you transitioned out of that into real estate full time, and you just tell us a little bit about your real estate business so people have context for these IGAs.
Sure. My business looks fairly similar to when I started. There's nothing really fancy about it. I've got a rental portfolio, and then I buy, fix, and sell a lot of properties. I wholesale some of them. I do local hard money lending, and that's pretty much it.
Okay.
So had a coaching business for a while, and I may get back into that at some point. So it's not. It's been a very lucrative business. I have very little overhead. I have this. A small office. I have one assistant that works for me, one person in the Philippines as well. One person, my assistant here, is with me in my office, and then one person in the Philippines. So we run a very, very small operation. So we self-manage most of our properties. A few of them are owned by IRAs, which we've got to have management companies for those, but everything else we self-manage. And then we do, the rehabbing business out of the office here.
Okay. I want to dive into that more. I just want to give our listeners a context for, like, when you mentioned postcards, they're like, well, what kind of business is he in? Sure. And so I wanted to make sure people understood what you're doing. And man, so it's so funny to me that, the concept of IGAs and fear and what you choose to focus on. I think a lot of people like to pretend I don't even want to say pretend because they really think they are a business owner, but they're spending all their time doing stuff that doesn't add a penny to their pockets, and it's not adding significant value. And I think a lot of that is, maybe it is procrastination, fear of like doing the stuff that matters, because, right. You can make logo designs all day and incorporate your LLC and do all this other stuff. But when you are faced with the reality of making money, and if you fail, Now you come to face with the possibility like, wow, is this for me? Can I do this? Is this going to work? And that's a scary question, I think, for a lot of people. And you can kind of ignore that a little bit by not facing it. It's like, not asking out the hot guy or the hot girl for fear of rejection. It's the same thing when you focus on income generating activities. Like sometimes those can be scary to people. What kinds of things like is it when so create this list? We got 3 or 4 days of an inventory, tracking everything we do. And what is your criteria? Because some things like what exactly is an IGA? Because some things like, okay, well, I'm not calling a seller, but I'm looking at properties in the MLS, for instance. Like how do you, I guess there's a direct IGA, then an indirect, like, or how detailed, or how do you classify those?
Sure. It's a little bit hard. I think initially you have to do it all before you can delegate it, right? Okay. So you understand the processes that need to happen and how everything works. So I think you kind of have stuff, on a piece of paper above the line and below the line. Below the line, you delegate. And getting a virtual assistant, for some it works great, others it does not work. I think it all depends on how you set that up. So I would go through and make processes for everything, do them on video. So if your VA doesn't work, you can hand off your processes to the next person without having to spend hours training them. But you need to be very, very specific in working with overseas VAs from what I've found. But as far as, what are the real IGAs? I think at the bottom, at the end of the day, it's how many people have you talked to help, that's going to lead you towards generating income. Because some people they're just scared to go out there. For me, starting out, and I still to this day do not like it, is the, going up at the RIA meetings in front of the room, like the haves and wants, and the networking part of it. They're like, okay, the first 10 minutes we're going to network. It's like, for me, it's like, okay, maybe I can scoot out of here. I'm just not comfortable with that. So when I first started out, I had a goal before I would leave a meeting. I had to go up and introduce myself to 8 people. I don't know why I picked 8, but 8 was my number. And it made me very uncomfortable to do that because I'm not the guy that can just go up and start talking to people. So that really pushed me to, and I wouldn't leave until I had those 8. And then, after the 3rd or 4th meeting of doing that, then it becomes, I don't want to say it becomes natural because I'm still to this day, I don't really enjoy
starting
it.
out and doing it yourself.
But
until
it
you
helps
start
your business,
delegating,
right? And
you
start seeing the benefits of that.
Where's the point where you start to delegate?
And you share what you do with someone and how can you help them? How can they help you? And then a deal comes along that may not be a fit for you, but you've met them, you've reached, out of your comfort zone and you know what they're looking for. And now you can connect to and put some money in your pocket.
Mm-hmm. So it's putting yourself, like, just whether you're comfortable with it or not, just putting yourself in a situation to pursue those IGAs. Hey guys, Wojo. Well, listen, we're going to be right back with the rest of this interview and the rest of the content. But there's one thing I want to tell you about before I forget, because it's so powerful. It's an awesome offer and it's free. And what I'm referring to is we're giving away a copy of the best-selling Life in Air book digitally online. You can download it for free. This is a book that has changed thousands and thousands of lives. It's selling like hotcakes, and you can get your own version of this. It's for free. You'll get a PDF version. Go to lifeinair.com. You'll see on the main menu, it says free book. Simply enter your information and we will send you the book. This is a story. It's not written like some dry business book. It's a story. It's a parable. And actually, believe it or not, all of the stories in this book are real life stories. They've just been kind of put together. In real life, they occur to different people. We put them together for one cohesive story in this book to make it, flow. People that even aren't readers are saying this is the best book they've ever read, and they're not even readers. They're finished it in a day, in a few nights. This is something you can get through very quickly, and it'll have a profound impact on your life. It's going to hit you upside the head like nothing ever has. It's been compared to books like Rich Dad, Poor Dad in terms of its perspective shifting abilities. It's going to make a huge difference for you. So go ahead, go to lifeinair.com right now, download your free version of the Life in Air book, and you can thank me later. Let's get back to the interview. One of the things, Brian, that you mentioned doing it all yourself. And so I've heard different things in this. Like some people are like, hey, don't just have somebody else do it right from the start. My experience is much more aligned with yours. Like when I first started investing, I was even going to the properties and watching the guys install, the shower drain. So but then it really came in useful later because I understood the process. I understood how this works, and I could even make recommendations and understand when a contractor was good and knew what they were doing versus didn't, because now I didn't want to be doing it like long term, but I knew the vernacular, I knew the language, I knew the systems, and it helped me a lot in my projects. I mean, I'm not going to for Life Inner, I'm not going to start coding websites, but I know enough to say, hey, this is kind of how this is supposed to work. And then I guess to your suggestion, you basically get yourself out of that and focus and make sure you're just doing like income generating things.
Right. And I think it comes down to like what type of, how big of a business do you want to have? I have no desire to have a big business. So for me, it was, I want to stay lean and mean and then hire as I need to and not hire a bunch of people and then figure out what they're going to do. And I think, even starting small and staying small and maybe growing incrementally, you have to get better before you get bigger. And if you don't, you just create a bigger problem for yourself. And so I think a lot of businesses that are like grow. And maybe even that's like the guy is starting out, owns 0 rental properties today and wants to have 30 of them by the end of the year. Well, there's going to be a lot of growing pains trying to figure that out, how to do that, how to get those properties renovated and turned over, unless you're buying turnkey. So it's, it's working through those small processes to get to do them better. But I think first it's figuring out how to do them so then you can efficiently and effectively communicate how to delegate that and what your expectations are.
Yeah, that's a great point. With that being said, what is your opinion on, like, say you have a super high income generating activity that you don't like, but there's something that is makes less money, but you enjoy it. Like, what do you advise somebody to do in those cases? Like, should they do it even if they're not crazy about it because it makes more money and it's important? Or, this is a tough one. I'm not even sure if there's an answer.
Well, I think it's pretty easy. It depends how, what your tolerance for being miserable is. Right?
Okay. Yeah.
And, no, you shouldn't do those things. As a business owner, you want to do the things that give you joy and happiness, even though some days are going to suck. Owning a business, that's just reality. It's not all sunshine and roses, that's for sure. As much as the books can tell you otherwise at times. So I think you should do what you find joy in, and then delegate the stuff. And like when I first started out, I was like a control freak with my business. Cause I'm like, no one can do it better than Brian can. And no one cares as much as Brian does. And I'm just better. Right. So I thought, and then I finally got around to hiring a part-time assistant for 15 hours a week. And like in 2 weeks, she was at 40. And I realized very quickly that a lot of that stuff that was below the line that I was still doing because I didn't have anyone else to do it, that I needed to delegate. That stuff I found out was actually sucking the life out of me. And she absolutely loved doing those things. And she did it a million times better than I could, or than I did, even though I thought I was so good at it. So, being able to delegate, and it was hard for me to let go a lot of that stuff. Again, just because I was like, no one cares as much as I do about my business and about the success. But the reality is, if you get the right people in the right seats, they're going to help you a lot.
Well, and I'm also hearing like now those things free you up to do and perform even better on the things you are doing, and focus on the things you're better at and make it. And so not only is it somebody's actually doing those things better, but a dual benefit, I guess, is that you're freed up to do more stuff.
Right. And one of the benefits that I was kind of wrong on when I hired my first assistant was that I thought hiring that assistant, I would be able to go out and generate more income because I was not allocating time towards those other activities. But how, I was wrong in basically how I structured it is that having her it bought my time back. So I had more time. And it wasn't that, okay, if she's working, 40 hours a week at 100%, then, when I was doing it all before that, it would, I could go out and generate that much more incremental income. It was basically buying my time back. So that's how I had to mentally go through like, okay, yes, this is worth it. And this is why, because it's, getting time back.
Got it. So you didn't go out and generate another 40 hours of revenue, but you bought your time back, which has a very real monetary value.
Right.
That can't even necessarily be categorized.
Right.
Well, and that's the difference between owning a business and being self-employed. Now you have a real business when there's systems and you have the opportunity to go and spend your time doing something else other than working in the business.
Right.
And enjoy life. Right.
And I can leave, family vacations,
Yes.
whatever, and things continue to roll. So yeah, it's good. But I've bumps and bruises along the way. That's for sure. It hasn't been all gravy.
Well, dude, I love that you shared that you made a mistake there. Tell us some of if you're cool with it, like share some of the things that you have learned along the way, either things that you were surprised by and that you had made mistakes on or thought differently about, or maybe mistakes you see other investors make that you've learned along your journey?
Sure. Great question. I think regardless of what business you're in, whether it's trinkets or houses, you're in the marketing business. And you either, if you not want to market, you're going to be forced to market at the end when you're putting your business up for sale. So you either market now or market later. And in the real estate side of things, where I think a lot of investors fail, because we see people coming and going all the time, right? Nationally as well as in our own markets. And I think a big reason for that is people don't allocate enough capital towards marketing on a consistent monthly basis. They may go, below $2,000 this month, but then, their budget shot and they have no money until 8 months later. And by then they're out of business. So, and they've gone on to, watch some other guru and some other course and try something else instead of like, okay, I've got $12,000 I'm going to spend on marketing. That means my job every single month is to spend $1,000 in try and get the biggest ROI every single month on that $1,000. And for some people, it's hard to do. And they may not have the money, but there's like, when I was coaching, someone was having a hard time financially. I'm like, go give plasma. Like, what do you mean? I'm like, you can get paid for your plasma. Like, well, why would I do that? So you can go market. Like, you don't have enough budget for marketing. Go give plasma so you can spend some marketing dollars. And it sounds crazy, but it's like, you got to do what others aren't willing to, the old saying, do what others aren't willing to do for 3 to 5 years so you can do what they can't do for a lifetime. So like, you got to get creative. And yeah, maybe you don't want to give plasma for the rest of your life, but if you need to give plasma for 4 months and make, I don't know how much you get for plasma, but it's enough to buy some bandit signs or send out some postcards.
Yeah. Yeah. So this gives a whole new meaning to that. Instead of blood, sweat, tears, we're talking blood, sweat, plasma.
Right.
Got it.
Like a lot of people just, they aren't willing to do what it takes to get like, okay, you got to think out of the box. You're up against a wall.
You're right.
You made a mistake or whatever it is, your budget's, you spent money somehow that you shouldn't have. And you got to get, get capitalized. Like starting out, my wife and I, we cut our budget, even though I had 1.5 years saved up, we cut our budget to, bare bones. And to this day, we still don't have cable TV just because we just don't watch it. But, if you're spending $150 on internet and cable and you're wondering why you can't send out a few postcards or whatever to get your business going, you can look at your budget, your line items and make some changes there.
So Brian, just based on your real estate business, because you've been in business and very successful for a good handful of years. We're here in the first quarter of 2021. So if anybody's watching this later, that's where we're at. Inventory is at an all-time low, no matter who I talk to in what state and what city. It seems like inventory is low, market prices are still high. interest rates aren't going up anytime soon because it'll implode the economy. So we know that interest rates are going to stay low, which is just creating all kinds of different things than what we've seen over the last 10, 15 years. So what are the highest IGAs right now? What are the things that are the most valuable? I think the other thing is there's a lot more real estate investors in the marketplace now than we've had before. Right. So how do you stay above the game? What are the things that are working today? Because they're definitely not the same things that worked in 2008.
Nothing's working well.
Yeah, I agree.
you have to be doing several different, I would say at least 3 to 5 different forms of marketing. Mm-hmm. And then hope one of those are working that month, because the following month, something else, what was working last month is probably not going to be working this month. It's just the way it is right now. It's very challenging assessing risk. I think a lot of investors are taking an astronomical amount of risk because the market is carrying them out of that risk. For example, paying too much for property, mm-hmm. and the market is hiding their mistakes there or over rehabbing it. Just because with prices going up, it's, they're not feeling a pinch,
until they do.
until they do. But right. I think when, last March when, COVID started, I think a lot of investors are like, whoa, this is going to be awful for us. We're going to get our clocks cleaned. Yeah. The market's going to take a bath. And it hasn't, right? People really haven't been affected. Landlords definitely have, as the government's, really almost, on the verge of putting a lot of landlords out of business with the eviction moratoriums, unfortunately. But on the rehabbers, things have been rosy. So I think there's a lot of investors right now have a feeling of invincibility, and they don't feel like they can get hurt. And I think that's a dangerous place to be. Mm-hmm. So I think it'll be very interesting to see what happens, because I don't think a lot of people have dialed back their risk tolerance at all. Yeah. I have, as a result, I'm not buying as much because I'm just not willing to pay crazy prices. So I look at it like if I miss a deal by $4,000 or $5,000, I did a bad job communicating with the seller, and that'll happen. And I missed it, but I'm missing stuff by $40,000 or $50,000, and I'm like, this is crazy, and I'm just not willing to pay those prices. So I guess back to your initial question, what's working? I'm still doing the same stuff I was doing. Direct mail. Working on SEO website stuff, pay-per-click ads. The penny saver type ads. There's no, I wish there was that magic pill.
No magic bullet.
There's, right. There's not. And it's definitely gotten tougher in your, dollars spent for deal acquisitions definitely gone up. But I think, it'll cycle back through and people will get rinsed out as, when the market takes a turn. When will that be? I don't know. I thought it would have a couple of years ago, and I've been completely wrong on that. Yep. I've been wrong on the stock market as well. So I'm the last person to ask.
Man,
I'm right there with you.
Yeah, it's kind of a crazy time. But depending on when you listen to this, there's still some gems here that were just shared that, even if the market is corrected or whatever, regardless of what's happened, you can learn here. So one thing I heard is you got to stay the course. Yep. You don't start changing your strategy maybe we didn't talk about strategy. We talked certainly about prices. We talked about, your numbers. Don't get caught up in the heat of the moment. Don't become an emotional, business owner who's making decisions just to keep up with the Joneses. I mean, that seems like everyone's leading, headed towards a cliff there. Be careful about that, and staying consistent with your marketing, which you mentioned earlier. Is marketing an IGA? Do you recommend business owners do their own marketing, or they hire that out?
I think initially you have to do it on your own to figure out how to do it and what to do. Okay. And then you can delegate it. Right now, I guess my involvement on the marketing side comes down to if I've got a new idea, I'm the one that's trying to figure out, okay, I've got this idea. What resources do I need and what do I need to do to deploy this new marketing idea. Okay. And then I figure out the process and the system and then hand it off.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah. Like you talked about before, teaching doing a video and teaching a VA to do some of your marketing and scraping and things like that. You can't really teach someone to do what you want them to do in your business until you've done it yourself.
Right.
And then be able to train them on what to do.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, the other thing I heard, Brian, here that's really worked out fortunately for you as well is, especially in this challenging market, this business climate that is kind of all over the place. The previous thing that you mentioned about keeping office overhead low, you have one assistant in your office and then a VA, your overhead is manageable. Like you haven't created this monster that is just, I mean, you have to feed constantly. And so that's no doubt how it helped you as well.
Yeah, it has. And, starting out, I wanted to have this big, bad investment company in Milwaukee and have a huge company. I just have no desire for that. It's, I keep a relatively low profile, and we've got a money-making business that does very well on a consistent basis. Does it have challenges from time to time? Sure. But having that low overhead, that's why I think a lot of the guys out there preaching, get the big business, you need your acquisitions team, your dispositions team, all of these different people. Sure, maybe if you're going to have a huge business, but now you've got a beast to feed every month. And at the end of the day, after all these splits and everything, all the money's divided up, you're left with this, but you're taking all of that risk. And there has to be a good reward for the risk being taken, at least in the way I think about things. Otherwise, it makes no sense. So I like keeping it small. That being said, I am the acquisitions guy. So I'm the one going on the appointments and meeting with sellers. I enjoy doing that part of it. And I think that's where a lot of my money is made, just building rapport with sellers and connecting. The downside of that is when I leave and go on vacation for, 2+ weeks, I then outsource that to a friend of mine and he goes on those calls for me. Otherwise my business would stop. Yeah. But I've got, people in place that I can rely on, to keep things rolling if appointments come in. Got
it. So we got a couple minutes left here, man. Is there anything else, like any big mistakes or advice you'd give business owners? Maybe they're just starting out, maybe they're in intermediate level. They're still kind of learning. What are some of the other things that you've seen or you'd recommend?
I would recommend being careful who you share your ideas and vision with on what you're going to do. Like if you're leaving corporate world and starting out a business, when I was leaving the corporate world, like my parents were like, "What are you doing? Do you have a problem? Like, what is going on in your life? Like, we need to talk about this." They were like very concerned.
Yeah.
I can relate to this. You guys know a little bit of my story, 15 years of school. And then I tell my mom I'm going to, real estate investing full time. And she almost, I thought she was gonna have a heart attack right there.
Yeah.
You have a PhD, you're going to do what? And so I can totally relate to that. And so you're talking from a perspective of like making sure you get the right, bug in your ear, making sure you have people that are supportive and encouraging. Is that where you're going with that?
Yeah, because if like my parents eventually, turn the corner, but like if you have a bunch of like people that are giving you like, "Oh, this is a dumb idea." Like if you're surrounded with that all the time, you're going to probably start believing it. So I think you've got to be selective on who you share, those ideas and dreams and visions with, to make sure that you've got people that are supportive. Otherwise it's just I think mentally it would just be harder.
Right. Well, I know for myself, if it wasn't for, my mastermind buddies in life and here, I don't even know what I'd be doing right now. I'd have a job somewhere probably. And so, I totally understand the importance of that and being around the right people and that are feeding you the right information. That's awesome.
Yeah. And then I think on the other side of it, for people that are working that job now, that are trying to get a business up and running, whether it's just a side hustle or or eventually a full-time business, is, I said it before, if you can't do it part-time, you're never going to be able to do it full-time. So you've got to figure out, you've got to really manage your time well and be efficient with it, and not let that side business or side hustle control your life. because I think it's easy for stuff like that to happen, where you just get like, okay, I'm going to do this. I got to hustle. And like, grind it out. Like, the hustle and the grind, you kind of hear those words all the time, and it's like grinding, that's painful. Like, I don't want to grind every day. Like I want to have enjoyable days at the office. So, I don't know. Just being aware of, I guess, what you're doing and how you're going about it so that you're setting yourself up for success.
Got it.
But you've got to you got to really work on that part-time to be able to leave, and then save, like cut your budget if you need to. And, for me, my comfort level was 1.5 years in the bank. Some people having 1.5 years in the bank would be the worst thing possible for them. Just from a coaching, when I was coaching real estate investors, we had like one guy came in, was an HVAC guy, and lost his job, had no crutch. He had to make this work. Right. And the other person, still was making good money, at their 40-hour-a-week job, was doing this on the side, but they're very intelligent and they got it. They have good business sense. So putting the two together, I'm like, well, the person with the business sense, I think, and the additional income, I think they're going to do better than the HVAC guy that doesn't, he's very good at his trade, but as far as business sense and getting things going, it's going to take him, I think, a little longer. And the exact opposite happened. So the HVAC guy, like, he was super coachable, did everything I told him to do. He had no crutch. He didn't have that other income coming in, so he had to make it work, and he did. And the other person, they're just kind of lingered along and didn't do much, but they both had the exact same information. It wasn't like we were coaching, giving this person this information, this person different information. They both had the exact same resources available, but the one person crushed it because they didn't have that crutch. So I think it's, for me, I needed that money in the bank just from a mental health standpoint, from a stress level.
Right.
But that's just the way I work. I'm probably more conservative than most.
I think a lot of that comes down to people's why. Why are you doing it? So the guy that, was, and good is the enemy of great. So when you're comfortable, sometimes you just don't go do what you need to do because you don't have to. The HVAC guy had to, but he also had a big enough why to not make that be desperation. Because sometimes if people don't have any backup, they also get really desperate, and the sellers can feel that, and they end up crashing and burning, and they need to leave. So there's probably a delicate balance between having, some backup money in the bank and not. Some of it's personality, but I think it really boils down a lot of times to the why. You were comfortable because you had that 1.5 years, but you also had a burning desire and a strong why of why you wanted to make it on this island. You burned all the ships, and you're going to make it on this island. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. Great catch there, Jackie. Well, man, listen, our time is up, but I really want to thank you for being on the show, Brian. I'm grateful for our friendship, and I know our listeners got a ton out of this, dude. This is going to be one that you're going to want to listen to over and over again. There's a lot of nuggets dropped in here, and dude, I could see you being a repeat guest here, man. So look for that next invite.
All right, sounds good. Thanks, Jackie and Jason. I appreciate you having me.
See you, man.
A lot of fun. See ya. Bye.
Wow, what a great episode, Jackie. Like that, Brian, every time I talk to him, I learn something. I mean, I've been talking to this guy for years, and, so maybe he'll say something that I've seen him do, but he explains it, or he just kind of sheds a little bit of light on how he runs his business. What were some of your favorite parts of that?
He is, though. He's just such a consistent business guy. I love that he shared the beginning struggle. And I think a lot of us, I know I personally, same thing, right? But really figuring that out, and today him sharing that so that maybe somebody else had eyes wide open during that point and said, you know what, you're right. Like, I need to streamline what I've got going on and get back to living life. So that was my favorite part.
I'll tell you. So when I started my business, I also started part-time. I still have my full-time job, started flipping houses on the side. But I had a very interesting, my experience was also fear-based, but it was also when I went full-time, I found myself working less than part-time And it was because I had this fear of like, okay, I had my cushion of my full-time income before, and now I almost had like this paralysis where I was afraid to like do the stuff. And I had to like shake myself out of it to make this happen. And I had to get back on my feet. And I had some other things that kind of went on at the same time with personally. And so that kind of all together culminated in me having really struggled, but the struggle is part of it. Like no business owner goes through business without struggle. I don't care who you are. Like you're going to have a struggle.
Doesn't matter. Yep.
Yeah. I also love like IGAs. Wow. What an important concept. If you're thinking of like, what do I do today in my business? I don't know. What are you doing? What are you doing to make money?
Right. Yeah. And again, he's just super consistent with that. And that was gold, right? Doesn't matter what the market is. You keep doing what you've done. You know, maybe you tweak it a little, but you keep doing what you've done because that's what brings in the deals.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And I mean, I also love how he mentioned, you know, about hiring somebody to get his time back. Like it wasn't that he necessarily became, you know, X-fold more profitable by bringing somebody on, but you know, and that's just, a lot of people think that like, hey, if I hire somebody to do this other stuff, you know, I'll be able to focus. And I even kind of mentioned that you'll be able to focus on all these income generating activities, make more money. Well, maybe not. Maybe what would it be like if you just had more time and more freedom? I mean, after all, like we're in business to experience the life we want. It's not just for the sake of making money. Right. And so I found that really interesting as well.
I agree. And that's where it backs up into your life and air vision, right? If you have a vision for your life that says, I get to do this and that and the other thing, and I get to spend my time in these ways, then I agree with him. He thought he wanted to be the biggest in town. I was in the same place. And then all of a sudden you realize like, I just want to kind of stay off the radar, generate my income, live my life. And that's gold right there. Yep. You know, you got to figure out your vision first and then chase that.
Well, and I love how you said, you know, it comes down to your why. Right at the end, because that's part of your vision. Right. And so that ties in like why you're doing all of this. Awesome episode. I want to thank you for being a co-host here.
Thanks for inviting me.
Awesome. You're like a natural. Like I'm going to, you guys, I might be kicked off of this show and you might just be hearing from Jackie from now on. She totally ran this.
But I'm okay replacing Peter. Sorry,
right, Peter, you're out, bro.
He's out.
Listen, if you like this show, if you want to leave us a review, we'd love to hear from you. Please leave us a rating, subscribe, tell your friends about it, tell all your neighbors about it. This is a show that we're helping people like live the life they want to live. And that's what it's all about, is having an awesome life that you absolutely wake up every day excited for. Also, if you want to be part of the Life Leader community, which I hope you do, head on over to the Life Leader app. It's free. You can be part of the conversations that are going on every single day, rub shoulders with people that are like-minded, or I should say life-minded. And especially, you know, Brian mentioned being around the right people. We're the right people. All right. So get into our community and get filled up, get fed, get encouraged so that you can live the life you want to live. Until next time, everyone, see you on the next episode. And thank you for the privilege of serving you. Take care.